My name is Evelyn. I'm 62 years old. The moment I stepped onto the porch of my beach house, I heard my own daughter spit words I never thought I'd hear. Why is that old Leech here? There's no room for you. Her voice cut through me like broken glass. I froze, gripping the keys in my hand, wondering how the child I once cradled in my arms could treat me like a stranger in my own home. For a second, the ocean breeze felt colder, heavier, almost as if it carried her contempt. Before I go on, I want to ask you something. Which city are you watching from? Write it in the comments. Who knows, maybe we're from the same place. Because standing there, with my heart racing, I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about every parent who has ever felt pushed aside, unwanted, by the very family they gave everything to. And that day, I decided I wouldn't stay silent anymore. When I turned the key and stepped into the threshold of my beach house, I felt as though I had crossed into another universe. The familiar scent of cedarwood and ocean breeze was gone, replaced by the stench of fried food and stale beer. My daughter, Amanda, stood in the living room with her arms crossed, glaring at me as if I were some unwelcome intruder. Her words still echoed in my chest. Why is that old Leech here? No room for you. I had prepared for a weekend of peace, of solitude, of listening to the waves crash against the shore. Instead, I was greeted by chaos. There were towels draped over my wicker chairs, the ones I had chosen so carefully last summer. My favorite seashell lamp was knocked sideways on the floor. Shoes, toys, and half-empty soda cans were scattered across the rug I had bought on a trip to Charleston. Every corner of the house screamed invasion. My sanctuary had been taken over, and the cruelest part of it all was that the person responsible was my own flesh and blood. Amanda had always been strong-willed, but this was something different. Her eyes were cold, defiant, carrying none of the warmth I once knew when she used to curl up beside me as a little girl. I wanted to believe this was temporary, that she was stressed, that maybe I had walked in at the wrong time. But the smirk on her face told me otherwise. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't sorry. She felt entitled. Behind her, I saw strangers moving freely in my space. A man in a Hawaiian shirt sipping a beer on my balcony as if it belonged to him. A young woman bouncing a baby on her hip while resting against my antique dining table. Teenagers stomping across the deck, leaving sandy footprints behind them. I wanted to scream, to demand everyone leave, but my voice got stuck somewhere deep in my throat. I clenched the keys in my palm so tightly I thought they might break. Amanda's husband, David, appeared from the kitchen holding a plate of nachos as though he had every right to be there. He smiled casually, as if we were the best of friends. "Oh, Evelyn, you're here already. Amanda said we could use the place for a while. Hope that's not a problem." His tone was light, dismissive, and dripping with arrogance. It was more than just the invasion of my property. It was the dismissal of my existence. As if my years of sacrifice, of saving, of building this home brick by brick, meant nothing. I had worked double shifts as a nurse for decades, every penny put aside to buy this house so I could one day have a corner of peace. And now, standing in that moment, I felt like a guest in my own dream. Amanda leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough for only me to hear. "Don't start your drama, Mom. We're staying. If you don't like it, you can leave." Her words sliced deeper than any stranger's insult ever could. My daughter wasn't just ungrateful, she was cruel. I swallowed hard, forcing back tears. I wasn't ready to fight yet. Not there, not surrounded by her army of guests. Instead, I simply nodded, whispering, "It's okay, dear." But inside, something stirred. A quiet fire that would soon grow into an inferno. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the small guest room, ironically, in my own house, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and music that shook the walls. Every giggle from Amanda and her friends cut into me like a knife. This was supposed to be my weekend of serenity, the one place I could breathe. Instead, it felt like a punishment. Memories flooded back of the times Amanda and I had spent here together when she was a child. We would collect seashells at dawn, cook pancakes in the tiny kitchen, and sit on the deck to watch the horizon bleed into shades of pink and gold. She used to hold my hand tightly, asking if we could stay forever. I had promised her this house would always be her safe place. How had that innocent little girl grown into the woman who now treated me like a burden? The laughter grew louder, and then came the sound of something breaking, glass shattering against the floor. I flinched, But no one knocked on my door to apologize. No one even cared. The respect I once thought was unshakable between a mother and daughter had been reduced to ashes. I thought of leaving, of packing my bag and driving away in the middle of the night. But then, I remembered the years of sacrifices, the nights I worked until my hands trembled, the double shifts when my body screamed for rest. This house wasn't just wood and paint, it was my blood, my sweat, my tears. Leaving would mean surrendering everything I had fought for. So I stayed. I sat by the small desk near the window, staring at the moonlight dancing on the waves. I breathed slowly, reminding myself that storms always pass, that silence can be more powerful than words. Yet, beneath the calm surface, anger brewed. Amanda's voice carried down the hall at one point. "She'll get over it. She always does. She's too weak to do anything about it." Her words stabbed me with precision. Weak. That's how my own daughter saw me. I felt my fists tighten as hot tears streamed down my cheeks. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had been too forgiving, too accommodating, too willing to stay quiet to avoid conflict. But something inside me shifted that night. For the first time, I asked myself, what if I wasn't weak? As the dawn light began to creep through the curtains, I made a silent vow. I would not let my daughter's cruelty define me. I would find a way to take back what was mine. And when I did, Amanda would understand exactly who she had underestimated. Morning brought the kind of quiet that isn't peace, just the aftermath of noise. I slipped out of the guest room and walked the house with my phone, documenting everything. Beer cans in the planters, grease splattered across my stove, a shoe print on the white wall near the stairs like a careless signature. I took photos of the cracked seashell lamp and the stain spreading over my woven rug. I opened the sliding door to the deck and felt the early breeze on my face, cool and indifferent. Seagulls circled over the shoreline, as if nothing human could matter for long. In that indifferent calm, I made a decision. Kindness had run its course. I would keep my voice soft, but my actions would be made of stone. Quiet doesn't have to mean powerless. Silence can sharpen a blade. I brewed my coffee, my beans ground the way I like, strong and honest. The gurgle of the machine felt like a heartbeat returning to my ribs. I set one cup at my seat at the small kitchen table and stared at the indentation on the cushion, worn by years of dawns I'd spent alone here, reading dog-eared paperbacks. This place had a memory of me. It would remember whose name it whispered. Amanda shuffled in, hair in a messy bun, phone in hand, eyes glued to the screen. She didn't say good morning. She didn't ask how I'd slept. She just reached past me for a mug that wasn't hers, as if everything within reach was naturally hers. The theft wasn't the mug, it was the assumption. "Coffee?" I asked, pouring without waiting for a reply. My voice sounded even maternal, the way it had when she scraped her knees as a child. She blinked, surprised, as if she expected me to accuse or plead. I slid the cup toward her, then kept mine. The gesture said, "I still choose." David stumbled in behind her, yawning, tapping at his smartwatch. "We'll be here just a little longer than planned," he said casually, as if he were notifying a hotel clerk. "The kids love the beach." He smiled wide, a politician's grin that never reached his eyes. I took a slow sip and let the bitterness coat my tongue. "House rules," I said gently, tapping the table with my fingernail. "Shoes off inside, dishes washed immediately. No loud music before noon. No one uses the terrace without asking." I lifted my gaze to meet Amanda's stare. "And no one speaks to me the way you did yesterday. Not in my home." Amanda snorted, but the sound wavered. "Or what?" she muttered. I didn't answer her question. I slid a folded paper across the table, an old HOA sheet with the quiet hours clause highlighted and my name underlined at the bottom. My coffee steamed. My hands were steady. The tide was turning, and she felt it. By mid-morning, I'd washed the dishes they left and lined them to dry, each plate gleaming like a small victory. I vacuumed the rug slowly, watching the sand disappear and the color rise back to life. Some people think cleaning is servitude. They don't know it can be a declaration. I am restoring what belongs to me. Order, then boundaries, then consequences. Veronica, my daughter's friend who had slept on the couch, drifted in and offered a muted morning, guilt sketched in her expression. She helped fold towels without being asked, and for a moment the house felt cooperative, almost warm. Even the baby's coo from the hallway sounded softer. There were witnesses to how I moved, calm, precise, unshakable. In the afternoon, I pulled down the cedar box from the pantry, where I keep every deed and receipt like a map of my life. The original bill of sale, the renovation permits, the letter from the contractor who repaired the roof after Hurricane Matthew, my name, my signature, my dates, the lineage of rightful ownership in black and white. The paper wasn't angry or loud, it simply told the truth. I called my insurance agent and asked neutral questions, the kind professionals like, hypothetical, measured, documented. Then I phoned the HOA office and confirmed the guest policy, the parking limits, the noise restrictions, and the trespass guidelines. I wrote everything in a neat list, bullet points forming a spine. Facts are not accusations. They're anchors. At sunset, when the sky bruised into purple and gold, I stood on the deck while the teenagers kicked a soccer ball too hard against the railing. Please, not against the railing. Please, not against the rail. I said gently. It's recently sealed. My tone startled them. It held no apology. They moved to the sand without protest. Boundaries, when spoken softly but firmly, sometimes land better than shouts. Amanda watched me from the doorway, arms folded, jaw tight. You're making them uncomfortable, she said, like a rehearsal. Good, I replied, turning to face her fully. Discomfort is what tells us where the edges are. The ocean murmured behind me, steady as a metronome. For a flicker of a second, I saw confusion pass through her eyes. That evening I cooked a simple dinner: lemon chicken, roasted potatoes, a salad with cherry tomatoes that still smelled of sun. I set the table, not to serve them, but to remind the house who I was in it. People came, offered hesitant thanks, and sat. Even David said, "This is good, Evelyn," his voice softening in the candle glow. He wanted truce without accountability. I gave him courtesy without concession. Before bed, I slid a note onto the fridge with painter's tape. Quiet hours, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. Parking, 2 cars only, registered to owner, terrace use by permission. No exclamation points, no threats, just policy and penmanship. I clicked off the kitchen light and caught my reflection in the window. Older, yes, but not small. I didn't feel like a guest anymore. I felt like the tide, slow, certain, impossible to argue with. At dawn, I rose before anyone else and walked the perimeter of the house like a lighthouse keeper, checking every corner, every hinge, every latch, making sure the place could feel me again. I opened windows to let salt air sweep out the stale smell of last night. I straightened frames on the wall until the horizons inside them were level with the horizon outside. This wasn't fussiness, it was reclaiming rhythm. I printed 2 copies of my guest policy and slid one under Amanda's door, tucking the second into a clear sleeve on the fridge beside the quiet hours note. I added a line in careful script. Violations will result in immediate removal from the property. Not a threatened outcome, the kind adults understand. I underlined immediate ones. When the house began to stir, David tried levity. "We're taking the kids to the boardwalk today," he said, jingling car keys like a promise. "Maybe you can relax." He wanted me to be the old version of myself, accommodating, invisible, grateful for crumbs of courtesy. I offered a neutral smile and said, "Perfect, be back by 9. Boundaries sound like bedtime, but they are freedom." Amanda appeared last, eyes red from sleep or anger, I couldn't tell. She glanced at the sleeve on the fridge, then at me. "Is this for real?" she asked, disbelief masking fear. "Yes," I answered, pouring coffee with steady hands, "and it's overdue." She looked like she might argue, but the weight of the word overdue landed between us, undeniable as gravity. Before they left, a teenage boy dragged a sandy cooler through the hallway, scraping the wood. I stepped forward, placed the felt pads under the cooler's corners, and said kindly, "This house is older than all of you. Treat her like a grandmother." He flushed and nodded, and the smallest hint of respect entered the room like a shy bird. The day stretched long and clean while they were gone. I repaired the seashell lamp with epoxy, the crack becoming a pale vein that somehow made it more beautiful. I transplanted the bruised geraniums into fresh soil, whispering, "You're safe now," to leaves that didn't need the words but perhaps understood the tone. Healing is not flashy. It is repetitive devotion. In the afternoon, an HOA patrol truck rolled by, and I waved the officer over. We had a friendly chat about parking limits and occupancy caps. and he left me with a stamped notice I could use if needed. My name and lot number looked official in black ink authority, distilled into a rectangle of paper. I slid it behind the deed in the cedar box, a quiet sword sheathed. They returned at 8:57, sunburned and loud, arms full of food containers and souvenirs. 9, I said pleasantly, checking my watch with a smile. David forced a laugh. Amanda said nothing. The clock had spoken before I needed to. Time can enforce what tempers cannot. Dinner turned into a test I didn't announce. Music crept up and I lowered it without comment. Shoes crossed the threshold and I pointed to the mat with a look that made words unnecessary. A bottle teetered near the edge of the counter, and I steadied it, then shifted the coaster to inches, a choreography of prevention. Control isn't loud, it's precise. Amanda finally snapped. "This is ridiculous," she said, hands flung wide. "You're acting like a warden, Mom." The word warden hung heavy, meant to shame me back into softness. I breathed once, then twice, tasting lemon and rosemary from the chicken I'd roasted. "No," I said, voice level. "I'm acting like an owner." The room tilted toward silence, the kind that listens. David tried to triangulate. "We're family," he said, palms up, performing reason. "We should be able to work something out without all these rules." I met his gaze. "Families honor rules most," I replied, "because we intend to see each other again." His mouth closed on a sentence that never found air, and a teenager murmured, "She's right," thinking I couldn't hear. Veronica, who had watched me all day, stepped beside the sink and began rinsing plates. "I'll help," she said, simple as a truth. The others followed, an assembly line of clinking dishes and careful hands. Order can be contagious when modeled, not demanded. Amanda stood apart, arms folded, guarding her grievance like a fragile possession. When the kitchen shone and the clock struck 10, I clicked off the pendant light and left only the soft lamp glowing in the corner. The house exhaled. I heard the ocean beyond the glass, a long inhale, a longer release, the endless lesson of tide. Advance, retreat, repeat. I turned to Amanda and said gently, "Good night," a peace offering that wasn't surrender. She didn't take it. "Robert said we could stay as long as we want," she muttered, invoking her father like a talisman. My ex-husband had always enjoyed granting what wasn't his to give. "Robert doesn't own this house," I replied, not unkindly. "And neither do you." The lamp's warm circle framed us like a stage, and for once I didn't mind the audience. Her chin lifted, eyes wet with fury rather than sorrow. "You never loved me the way you loved this place," she accused. Finding the oldest weapon, my heart stumbled but kept beating. "I built this place to love you better," I said, "so I could rest enough to be your mother without breaking." The truth softened the air, though it did not fix us. Some bridges require weight-bearing tests before they're safe again. I went to my room and closed the door with care, not finality. On the nightstand, I placed the repaired seashell lamp and watched its new seam glow like a healed scar. I thought of what remained to be done: papers to file, calls to make, reckonings to engineer, not out of vengeance, but out of respect for the woman I still was. Tomorrow, the consequences would begin to take shape. Tonight, I slept in my name. Morning brought resolve braided with patience. I drove into town, windows down, letting the salt air cool whatever anger still smoldered in me. At the locksmith, I requested a full recce with smart cylinders, owner override only, guest codes expiring at midnight. "Summer crowds?" the clerk asked. "Family crowds," I answered, and he nodded like he'd heard that storm before. I scheduled the install for the next afternoon, when Amanda planned to be out again. Next stop was the Wi-Fi provider. I reset the account, changed the password, and set parental controls that would throttle streaming after quiet hours. Not to punish, just to make the house align with the values I built it on: rest, respect, rhythm. People think boundaries are walls. They're actually windows that open and close on purpose. I printed the new password and tucked it into my planner, under a paperclip shaped like a wave. At the county office, a patient clerk explained trespass notices and the difference between guests and occupants. I listened closely, asked measured questions, and left with a simple form that fit in my purse like a folded spine. I hoped never to use it. Hope is cheaper than litigation, and worth more. Still, carrying it steadied my breath. Preparedness can sound like calm where panic once echoed. Back at the house, the ocean was bright as hammered silver. I found two teenagers kicking a ball against the fence again. I walked over and joined them for 3 passes, laughing when I missed on purpose. Sand only, I said after pointing toward the beach. They listened because I had played first and ruled second. Authority borrowed a human face, and that was enough. Amanda returned later than promised, arms heavy with shopping bags, eyes scanning for a fight. I offered none. Dinner at 7, I said. And please keep the terrace door closed. The AC struggles when it's open. She rolled her eyes, but the door clicked shut. Small obedience, like a first stitch in torn fabric, held more meaning than she knew. David hovered, testing charm. We could pitch in for groceries, he offered, fingers tapping a rhythm that betrayed his nerves. Thank you, I said, handing him a neat list with prices. Cash is easiest. He read the numbers, surprised by the true cost of a life he'd treated like a free resort. Paying is a lesson some people can only learn by paying. In the late afternoon, I trimmed the rosemary bush by the steps, its scent rising like a prayer I could actually believe in. Veronica came out with iced tea and set it beside me without speaking. The air between us felt like a truce made of competence. She understood the language of doing. We sat a minute, listening to gulls. You're changing the weather in this house, she said quietly. Yes, I said. It needed a different season. When night fell, quiet actually arrived. Not merely the absence of music, but a textured hush, the kind that lets you hear your own name. In bed, I touched the seam of the repaired lamp and thought of the seam inside me, toughening by the hour. I was not plotting revenge. I was designing order. Revenge is smoke. Order is architecture. Sleep took me gently, like a tide that finally met the shore it was meant to kiss. The locksmith arrived right after lunch, a cheerful man with 4 arms like oars and a van full of solutions. He swapped cylinders, installed the keypad, and demonstrated the owner override with the patience of a teacher who loves his subject. Codes expire at midnight unless you renew, he said, thumbs flying. You'll always have control from your phone. Control, but quiet, exactly what I had been building toward. Amanda watched from the kitchen, pretending not to. This is overkill, she scoffed, but her voice had fractures. It's protection, I replied, not looking up. For the house. For me. For all of us. She snorted, yet stayed in the doorway until the tutorial ended. As if proximity might grant her ownership, it could not. Entitlement often mistakes nearness for right. I sent everyone to the boardwalk with cash David had provided and a suggestion to try the funnel cake stand near the pier. Generosity is sharpest when it's chosen, not demanded. The door closed behind them, and the house exhaled. I walked room to room, setting the new codes, recentering furniture, restoring the narrative. This chair faces the ocean. This table holds conversation. This shelf is for books, not clutter. Objects remembered their jobs. On the terrace, I laid out a fresh tablecloth and set 4 plates, not 8, a choice, not a slight. Veronica returned first, saw the place settings, and nodded. Smaller dinner, she asked. Smaller circle, I said, meeting her eyes. Circles can widen again once their edges are strong. She offered to prep the salad. I handed her a knife that fit her palm like a promise. Amanda blew in with the wind, cheeks pink from sun and irritation. Why are there only 4 plates? She asked, scanning for insult. Because that's who our SVPD, I said mildly, tapping the posted policy. Guests by permission. Ask next time. Likely yes, but ask. The word ask fell into the room like a new gravity. Resentment doesn't like gravity. It prefers weightlessness. At dinner, the ocean tuned us to honesty. David complimented the food and, for once, washed his own plate without theatrics. Veronica told a story about losing and then finding herself after a divorce. The baby babbling punctuation from the high chair. Amanda stayed, mostly silent, a satellite running low on fuel. Silence can be either refusal or reflection. I decided to believe it was the second. Belief is a risk I still take for my child. After we ate, I brought out a box marked Memories, photos of Amanda with sandy knees, toothless grins, birthdays with crooked cakes. I wasn't weaponizing nostalgia. I was laying down a bridge plank by plank. You loved it here once, I said, spreading snapshots like shells. I still want you to, but love has to live by house rules. My voice didn't tremble. Her eyes did. When the clock reached 10, the house slipped into its soft hour with no one pushing against it. I stepped onto the deck and watched the lighthouse blink its patient language across the bay. Behind me, I heard Amanda's chair scrape, then her footsteps pause. "Good night, Mom," she said. Not quite warm, not quite cold, but human. "Good night, Amanda," I answered. And for the first time in years, those words felt like a beginning rather than an ending. The next morning I woke before sunrise, drawn by the sound of waves breaking with a rhythm older than any quarrel. I brewed coffee and stepped onto the deck, watching the horizon bleed into orange. For the first time since Amanda's arrival, the house felt like mine again. Not entirely, but enough to breathe, enough to stand tall. Amanda emerged quietly, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes carrying exhaustion deeper than sleep could mend. She didn't speak at first, just leaned against the railing as if remembering how to share silence with me. For a moment, we were mother and daughter again, not rivals in a war neither of us asked for. She finally whispered, "You don't understand what it's like, Mom, the pressure, the bills, David working less, me trying to keep everything afloat. I needed this place." Her voice cracked on the word needed, and I saw not arrogance, but desperation hiding beneath. I set my mug down. "I understand more than you think. I built this house while juggling double shifts and nights. I cried in my car because I had nothing left to give, but I never took what wasn't mine. I fought to create it instead." My words weren't sharp, just steady, like the tide. Amanda's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away, turning her face toward the sea. "Maybe I don't know how to fight the way you did." Her confession clung to the wind, fragile, almost invisible. For the first time, I glimpsed the child she once was, the one who trusted me to carry her through storms. I reached out, not with my hand but with words. "Then let me teach you. Boundaries aren't punishments, they're lessons. They show us how not to drown." I could see her processing, the shield of defiance cracking at the edges. David's voice broke the moment when he stumbled onto the deck, phone in hand. "The WIF's down," he muttered, irritated. Amanda turned to him, something sharper in her eyes now, not at me, but at him. "Maybe that's not the worst thing," she said. It was small, but it was a start. As the sun climbed, I realized change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through broken voices, through pauses at dawn, through daughters who finally admit they're tired of sinking. The day unfolded with unusual calm. The children played in the sand instead of tearing through the house. Veronica took the baby for a walk, humming softly under her breath. Even David seemed subdued, checking his phone less, pacing more. The atmosphere wasn't healed, but it was mending like a bone beginning to set. I spent the morning in the garden, hands deep in soil, planting new rosemary cuttings beside the bruised geraniums. Amanda joined me without being asked, kneeling in the dirt, silent at first, her manicured nails chipped quickly, and I half expected her to give up, but she stayed. After a while, she spoke, her voice quiet. "I used to love helping you plant things. Remember when I tried to dig a hole with my Barbie shoe?" She laughed at herself, and I smiled despite the ache in my chest. Memory is a gentle thief. It steals pain and leaves fragments of warmth behind. "I remember," I said. "You cried when the roots snapped, and I told you some things can be replanted. Not everything is lost." My words lingered heavier than I intended, but Amanda didn't flinch. Instead, she pressed the soil with care, as though this time she wanted the roots to hold. Later, I found her on the deck, scrolling through her phone. She sighed, set it down, and asked, "Do you ever get tired of being strong?" The question sliced deeper than accusation ever could. I answered honestly, "Every single day. But strength isn't what you feel, it's what you choose." Dinner was quieter than before, almost gentle. David tried to crack a joke about the new rules, but Amanda shot him a look that silenced him. For the first time, she defended me without realizing it. That silence was sweeter than applause. That night, as I locked the new door and checked the keypad, Amanda lingered nearby. "Thanks for letting us stay, even after everything," she murmured. She didn't hug me, but gratitude had finally slipped into her voice. It was enough. I lay in bed, the seashell lamp glowing faintly, thinking of how survival isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's found in small reconciliations, in shared soil under fingernails, in a single word spoken softer than yesterday. The following morning, I found Amanda in the kitchen before me, making coffee the way I liked it, strong. No sugar, no fuss. She slid the mug across the counter without a word, just a faint nod. It wasn't apology, but it was acknowledgement, and sometimes that's rarer. I sipped slowly, letting the warmth sink into places the cold had lived too long. Veronica came in carrying the baby, who stretched her tiny fingers toward me. "She likes you," Veronica said, her smile cautious but kind. I took the child into my arms, and for the first time in days, the house didn't feel divided into sides. A baby knows no grudges, only comfort. Her small hand rested on my chest, reminding me of simpler truths. Amanda watched, her lips parting as if she wanted to say something. Instead, she turned back to the stove, stirring eggs that would probably burn. I walked over and guided her hand gently, the way I had when she was a child trying to flip her first pancake. For one suspended moment, we were not enemies, not even grown-ups. Just mother and daughter in a kitchen that remembered us. David entered, rubbing his eyes, already tense. "So, Evelyn, what's the plan with all these new rules? We can't walk on eggshells forever." His tone carried a whine, as if responsibility were a burden too heavy for him. Amanda surprised us both by replying before I could, "Then maybe don't break the eggs." Her words struck sharper than mine ever could have. The silence that followed was telling. David muttered something under his breath and left the room. But Amanda stayed. She glanced at me, eyes uncertain but brighter than before. For the first time, I felt her stepping toward me instead of away. Later that day, I worked in the garden again, and Amanda sat nearby, scrolling on her phone less, asking about each plant more. I explained how roots spread in silence, strong beneath the soil, unseen but essential. She nodded slowly, as though she understood the metaphor wasn't only about flowers. That evening, the children sat quietly around the table, more curious than wild. Amanda joined in with small talk, asking about recipes and old family stories. It wasn't harmony, but it was movement. Healing doesn't sprint, it limps, stumbles, and then stands straighter each day. As I washed the dishes, Amanda came beside me, towel in hand. "I don't know if I can ever be like you," she whispered. I looked at her, tears softening my vision. "You don't need to be me, just be better than yesterday." That was the only rule I ever truly cared about. By the next afternoon, Amanda suggested we walk along the shoreline together. I hesitated but agreed, knowing the sea often untangles words stuck in the throat. The sand was cool beneath our bare feet, the tide brushing at our ankles like a patient teacher. For a while, we walked in silence, letting the ocean speak for us. Finally, Amanda said, "I've been angry for so long, Mom. At you, at myself, at life. I don't even know where it began." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, she didn't try to cover it with sarcasm or blame. She let herself sound broken. I breathed deeply, the salt air steadying me. "Anger is heavy," I told her. "We carry it thinking it protects us, but really, it just sinks us deeper. You don't need to let it go all at once. Just loosen your grip." I reached down, picked up a small stone, and tossed it into the surf. "See, even rocks belong to the ocean in the end." Amanda bent down, grabbed a stone of her own, and hurled it far into the waves. She laughed not mockingly, but freely, almost like the girl I remembered. "That felt lighter," she admitted. Her laugh echoed in the salt air, and I knew a wall had finally cracked. Back at the house, David noticed the change immediately. He frowned, as if her laughter betrayed him. "Don't forget why we came here," he muttered. Amanda's smile faded for a moment, but then she squared her shoulders. "Maybe we came here for more than free rent," she shot back. I didn't interfere. Some battles a mother should let her daughter fight herself. That night, Amanda joined me on the deck after everyone else had gone to bed. She rested her head on her folded arms, staring at the waves. "I don't deserve this place," she whispered. "Not the house, not you." My chest ached, but I said gently, "Deserve has nothing to do with it. Love isn't earned, it's lived." She turned to me, eyes glistening. "Then maybe I still have a chance." Her words felt like a tide pulling in, hesitant but inevitable. I placed my hand over hers, grounding her to the wood beneath us, to the roots we both shared. For the first time in years, I went to bed with hope, not the fragile kind that shatters at a harsh word, but the resilient kind that bends like seagrass and still rises with the morning sun. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of laughter, but this time it wasn't cruel. Amanda was outside with the children, showing them how to build a sandcastle, just the way I used to teach her. Her voice carried across the deck, soft and playful, weaving into the rhythm of the waves. For a moment, I stood at the window and simply let the sight heal me. When I stepped outside, Amanda looked up, hesitant, as if waiting for permission. I gave it with a smile. Add seashells to the walls, I said, pointing to the bucket by the railing. They make the castle stronger. The children squealed, rushing to collect shells, and Amanda's laugh rose unguarded. I hadn't heard that sound in years. It was music I thought I'd lost forever. David emerged later, grumbling about sand in the sheets. But Amanda didn't bend to his complaints. Then change them yourself, she snapped, eyes flashing not with anger, but with a new kind of authority. He muttered under his breath. But I saw the shift. She was beginning to draw her own lines. At lunch, I placed a photo album on the table, one filled with pictures of Amanda's childhood summers here. She flipped through slowly, her fingertips brushing across frozen smiles and sunburnt cheeks. I forgot how happy I was here, she murmured. I replied softly. The house didn't forget. It was waiting for you. That evening, we cooked together. I chopped vegetables while Amanda seasoned chicken with a confidence she hadn't shown in the kitchen before. The air smelled of rosemary and garlic, familiar and comforting. Veronica set the table, humming along with the children's chatter. Even the walls seemed to breathe easier. After dinner, Amanda lingered on the deck beside me. Mom, do you ever regret not giving up? All those years you worked so hard, didn't it feel like too much? I thought carefully before answering. Every sacrifice felt heavy then. But standing here now, seeing you smile again, no weight could ever outweigh this. Amanda's eyes shimmered, her jaw trembling as if she were holding back words too raw to release. Finally, she whispered, I don't want to lose you. My chest tightened, and I pulled her close, the ocean roaring its applause behind us. That night, I slept with a peace I hadn't felt since before she arrived. The house was no longer a battlefield. It was slowly becoming what I built it to be, a sanctuary, not just for me, but for us both. But peace is always fragile, and the next morning tested us again. David stormed into the kitchen, waving a bill. You changed the Wi-Fi plan. Do you know how much data you're limiting us to? This is insane. His voice was sharp, dragging the children's attention like a hook. Amanda stiffened, glancing at me as if waiting for backup. But I stayed silent, sipping my coffee. This was her fight now. Her eyes narrowed, and she said firmly, It's not your house, David. You don't get to complain about what you don't own. The words struck like lightning, leaving him stunned. He tried to laugh it off, but Amanda pressed forward. You've been treating my mother's home like a motel, and I'm done enabling it. If you can't respect her rules, maybe you shouldn't be here. Her voice shook, but the steel inside it rang clear. I felt pride swell in my chest, fierce and unstoppable. David's jaw clenched, his pride bruised. He muttered about leaving, about finding a hotel, but the threat rang hollow. The children clung to Amanda, not him, and Veronica crossed her arms, silently siding with us. For the first time, he looked like the outsider. When he stormed out to the deck, Amanda sank into a chair, her hands trembling. I reached across the table, covering them with mine. You were brave, I said softly. She shook her head, tears welling. I was terrified. I squeezed gently. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing anyway. Later that day, Amanda joined me in the garden again, her hands steady this time. I don't want to repeat your mistakes, Mom, she admitted, but maybe I can learn from your strength. I smiled, planting another rosemary sprig. That's all I ever wanted. At sunset, David returned, subdued, avoiding our eyes. He ate in silence, his arrogance dimmed by Amanda's defiance. It wasn't a victory parade, but it was a turning point. Amanda had stood tall, and no one could unsee it. That night, as I locked the door, Amanda whispered, Thank you for teaching me how to fight, even if it took me too long. I kissed her forehead gently. It's never too late. The ocean hummed in the distance, steady as truth. The morning after David's outburst, the house felt different, lighter, as though the walls themselves had exhaled. Amanda helped the kids pack their toys neatly, and for once, the floors weren't littered with crumbs and wrappers. Even the silence seemed more respectful, like the house was acknowledging the shift in balance. I took Amanda with me to the farmer's market that afternoon. She wandered through the stalls, pausing at baskets of peaches, fresh bread, and jars of honey. I forgot how much I love this, she admitted, holding a jar up to the light. It feels normal. The word I hadn't heard from her in years. On the drive back, she opened up again. Mom, I think I lost myself somewhere along the way. Between bills, David, the kids, I forgot who I was. Her voice carried both fear and longing. I kept my eyes on the road and said, then maybe this house isn't just my sanctuary, it can be yours too, if you let it. She nodded, silent but thoughtful. That evening, David confronted her again, bitterness thick in his tone. You're changing, Amanda. Don't forget who's always been there for you. She stood tall, her chin raised. Yes, my mother has. His silence was louder than shouting. For the first time, Amanda chose her allegiance without hesitation. The children noticed too. They clung to Amanda, following her lead, and even began helping with chores. Veronica whispered to me later, you've woken something in her. She's not the same woman who walked in here days ago. I smiled faintly. She's remembering who she's always been. At dinner, Amanda asked me for the recipe to my rosemary chicken. She wrote it down carefully, folding the paper into her pocket like treasure. I want to make this when we get home, she said. It wasn't about food, it was about carrying a piece of me, of us, wherever she went. That night, as I sat with my seashell lamp glowing beside me, I realized the house was no longer just mine. It had become a classroom, a battleground, and now, maybe, a place of rebirth. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future where Amanda and I stood side by side, not across from each other. The thought was fragile, but it was real and it warmed me more than the lamp ever could. The storm finally broke that weekend, though not in the sky. David packed his bags in a fury, slamming drawers and muttering curses under his breath. Amanda stood by the doorway, arms crossed, her voice steady. If you can't respect my mother's home, then maybe you don't belong in Itor with me. His face twisted, shocked by the words he never thought she'd speak. He tried to guilt her, to remind her of promises, of years together, but Amanda didn't waver. Respect starts at home, she said firmly. And if you can't give it here, then I don't want it anywhere. Her strength was unshakable, even as tears rimmed her eyes. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The children clung to Amanda wide-eyed, but she soothed them with a calm I had never seen in her before. It's okay, she whispered. We're safe. Her words filled the house like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. That evening, we sat together on the deck, just the two of us. Amanda leaned her head on my shoulder, the sound of the ocean wrapping us in its endless embrace. I don't know what comes next, she admitted, but I know I can't go back to the way things were. I stroked her hair gently. You don't need to know the whole path, just the next step, and you've already taken it. She nodded, her shoulders trembling with relief. Veronica came out later, baby on her hip, and quietly said, you gave her strength she didn't know she had. I looked at Amanda, who was finally breathing without fear, and answered, no. I only reminded her, it was already there. That night, Amanda tucked the children into bed herself, humming a lullaby I used to sing to her. I listened from the hallway, tears sliding down my cheeks. The cycle had turned. What I once gave her, she was now giving them. As I lay in bed, I realized something profound. This house was never just bricks, wood, or paint. It was the forge where strength was hammered, where brokenness was mended, where generations could find their way back, not just to me, but to themselves. The next morning, the house felt strangely quiet without David's constant presence. No heavy footsteps, no muttering, no tension dripping from the walls. Instead, there was calm, the kind of silence that invites peace rather than fear. Amanda cooked breakfast for the children while I brewed coffee. For once, the day began gently. As we ate together, Amanda looked at me differently. Eyes softer, voice steadier. Mom, I don't think I ever realized how much strength it takes to stand alone. I was so afraid of being abandoned. I clung to someone who didn't respect me. Her words carried both regret and awakening. I reached across the table, taking her hand. Standing alone doesn't mean being lonely. Sometimes it's the first step to being free. The children laughed nearby, and even Veronica seemed lighter, as if the house itself had absorbed the change. Amanda watched them for a long time, then whispered, I want to give them what you gave me, Safti. Respect, love that doesn't need to be earned. Tears pricked her eyes, but she didn't hide them this time. That afternoon, We walked through town together, just us women and children. We visited the bookstore, the market, the pier. Amanda bought a small journal, saying she wanted to start writing again, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. I saw a spark return to her, the spark that had been buried under years of struggle and silence. When we returned, Amanda gathered the children on the deck. "This house is special," she told them. "Your grandmother built it with her own hands and her own sacrifices. We're lucky to be here, so we'll treat it with respect." The children nodded solemnly, their young faces reflecting the seriousness of her words. Later that night, she came into my room and sat at the edge of my bed. "I thought I hated you, Mom," she admitted. "But really, I hated the parts of myself that felt weak. You've never been weak. And maybe I don't have to be either." I touched her cheek softly. "Weakness isn't the absence of strength, it's the place where strength is born." Her tears fell freely, and she didn't hide them anymore. For the first time in years, she let herself be vulnerable with me. As she left the room, she turned back and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." My chest ached, but it was a beautiful ache, the kind that comes when broken things begin to heal. The following day, Amanda surprised me again. She suggested we host a small dinner, not for friends or outsiders, but just for us, for family. She wanted to cook alongside me, to create something together. I agreed, my heart swelling with both hope and caution. We prepared the meal, side by side. She chopped onions while I seasoned fish, and we laughed when tears blurred her vision. "Cooking's harder than it looks," she said, giggling, and I replied, "Life is too, but both are worth the effort." It wasn't just dinner, it was a bridge being built, bite by bite, moment by moment. The children helped set the table, folding napkins into clumsy triangles. Veronica lit candles and placed them carefully in the center. The atmosphere felt warm, almost sacred. When we sat down, Amanda looked around and said, "This feels like home again." Her words nearly broke me, because they were true. During the meal, Amanda shared memories of her childhood summers. Here the sandcastles, the pancakes, the nights we fell asleep listening to the waves. The children listened, wide-eyed, realizing their mother had once been small, vulnerable, joyful. It was the kind of story that roots generations together. After dinner, we stepped outside to watch the sunset. The sky painted itself in golds and purples, the ocean mirroring every shade. Amanda leaned against the railing, whispering, "I never thought I'd find peace here again. I never thought I'd deserve it." I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. "Peace isn't something we earn, it's something we choose." Veronica took a photo of us, then me, Amanda, the children with the ocean behind us. She said, "You'll want to remember this day." She was right. It wasn't the end of our struggles, but it was proof that healing was possible. That night, Amanda kissed me on the cheek before bed. It was brief, hesitant, but it was real. It felt like the final thread of a torn fabric being pulled back into place. As I lay in bed, the lamp glowing softly beside me, I realized we had reached a turning point. The storms had not destroyed us. They had revealed who we truly were. And what came next would change everything.